DeceasedCraft is my favorite mod pack of all time. It topped my tier list last year, and I got the chance to replay it on MSMP this October. But does it hold up to a more critical look? I truly believe being unable to see flaws in your favorite media dooms you to repeat those flaws within your own projects, so I hope I can lay my thoughts out well and still demonstrate why I love this pack. DeceasedCraft is a modern take on the zombie apocalypse mod pack concept, one I love, as apocalypse stuff is so interesting to me. Performance-wise, the pack does okay. It's not great, but it also isn't terrible to run, especially if you're playing on an external server. Lost Cities is never great on performance, so pre-generating and using a smaller render distance may be optimal. Thankfully, we don't have shaders on by default, and I recommend against using shaders without tweaking them because the pack is meant to have absolute darkness, which I missed out on because I didn't realize until well into the playthrough. There are also certain zombie types that emit a lot of particles, which can be really bad for FPS, mainly when you get into the later game of the mod pack. Progression-wise, this pack is more unique, and it's well suited to me. I'm a loot goblin, to the point where I will strip down entire structures if I want the block it's made of. This pack encourages scavenging to the max. I barely crafted any of my immersive engineering or create items, I just had them on hand from looting so many structures. Speaking of, this pack's progression does center on create and immersive engineering with a lot of interesting custom recipes in the mix, and I believe stress units are buffed, but I'm not 100% certain on that. The quest book can serve as a nice guide, but because scavenging is a lot more viable than crafting, it wasn't really something I felt I needed personally. But it would be good to guide you if you're feeling a bit directionless early game. Speaking of the crafting, it is incredibly tedious to try to follow the intended crafting progression. The time and resource investment required to make certain things over just looting them has such a huge disparity, it's kind of insane. While this isn't a problem to me, I do understand how it could be seen as one to other types of players. Since we ran this on my private server MSMP, I was able to get some input from other players that went through the pack with me, and this was something they took issue with, which I can completely understand for people who enjoy automation and such with items they'll need more of. However, I think part of the reason I got into immersive engineering this time instead of just avoiding it, resulting in me actually learning a bit of the mod, is because that initial crafting barrier was gone. It's usually a pretty big struggle for me to get past the crazy crafting trees required by a lot of tech mods, which admittedly this pack kind of exacerbates with the custom recipes they have. I do think it's to encourage scavenging over automation though. I think something that further contributes to this is the minimap being present and certain buildings having specific types of loot. The buildings are distinct enough to be identified from a minimap, and the pack even tells you to look for a red H if you're struggling to find a hospital in the pause menu tips. These buildings are designed specially for the pack thanks to their own customizations done to the Lost Cities mod, which I thought they had their own fork of, and I'm now realizing that I was wrong about that. Oops. Having such unique world generation genuinely makes the pack feel so different, and it's always fun to work your way through the different structures and loot them, but you know, loot goblin. Some of them have loot that feels genuinely insane, which I won't spoil for the sake of encouraging you to play the pack, but it is very strong. My personal favorite is the hotel building, which is the one I decided to settle in during my playthrough. Sadly, settling up so high nearly led to me avoiding something very crucial with the pack's gameplay loop, and that's the Horde Nights. Horde Nights are something you're... What? Why is vintage... Wrong footage, my bad. Horde Nights are something you're impacted by every 14 in-game days, and they scale difficulty-wise with how long you've been playing the pack and how far you are from spawn. Admittedly, they're easily avoidable and not something to worry about for the first few times. You can kind of just pick a building and sit inside and not really be impacted. In fact, if you live the nomad life in this pack, you can kind of just post up in a tall building and not really see hordes as a threat, which isn't great, admittedly. I mentioned I settled in the hotel building, which is incredibly tall, and as a result, I barely noticed my first few hordes. That being said, when I did experience hordes in my building later game, I had zombies breaking in, digging wild tunnels to get to me, etc., which made them actually scary. I was beginning to think I may need a separate bunker to fight off hordes or set up like a barbed wire fence around my base to keep it more safe. I wound up going down to the base of my hotel and fighting off hordes just manually down there. Because at that point, I had so much create stuff set up, I would have been upset if it got destroyed, but ultimately it would have been because of my own lack of preparation. Unfortunately, I also made the mistake of going to the endgame biome, the Wastelands, and not checking my horde calendar first. That was terrifying, to say the least. In fact, the Wastelands are something big I want to touch on in this video, so if you're trying to avoid spoilers, I'd say it may be best to subscribe and like and comment for the algorithm, but also stop watching here and come back once you've played the pack. For those of you who don't care about spoilers, here we go. The Wastelands biome is one of the most dangerous places you can be. The zombies go from scary with extra variants to straight up reminiscent of escape and run parasites. The Wastelands are so much fun to explore and loot, especially when it comes to the lab with the portal at the bottom. When you're exploring, there are some zombie types you'll encounter, and the first one I want to draw major attention to is one called the Pregnant, which you also have a chance of seeing in your Horde nights and just kind of regularly during hordes. And the zombie itself admittedly is not an issue, but it spawns zombie minions called biddies, which are 100% overpowered. Even in some of the strongest gear, these things can 2 or 3 shot a player, and their hitboxes are so small they're rather difficult to spot and kill beforehand. I'd like to see some tweaks to them. I also want to talk about the bigger zombies and the boss types, but it's important to note that the next update 6.0 is a complete overhaul update, and it's not out yet. And because beta access is available on their Patreon, I will not cover anything related to it. It's also important to note I myself am not subscribed to their Patreon and haven't heard anything about the update in specific, which means anything mentioned here that winds up being similar is purely coincidental. As of the version I played, version 5.5.5, the criticism in this video stands. There is not a true final boss in the pack currently to my knowledge, which is fine, and it's just not completed yet. But the bosses that do exist are a bit lackluster. To put it simply, they tend to be a big zombie that has lots of health, is slow, and will 1 or 2 shot you in decent armor. And that describes the boss that you can sometimes encounter in the Wastelands. As for large zombies that you encounter in the final dimension of the pack, they follow a similar format but seem to do less damage. I'd also love to see some unique attacks from the zombies you can find there. The models are definitely interesting though, in a good way. Because the big zombies can be threatening up close, namely the big boss one in the Wastelands, you'd think this makes guns the more obvious choice, right? Wrong. Guns kind of pale in comparison to the damage that melee items can do, and bullet storage is also not great. There is a workaround my friends and I wound up doing where you can store a bunch of bullets using a backpack and some stack upgrades, and then use the auto refill upgrade to keep 1 stack in your inventory that keeps refilling. I assume this is the intended way to handle ammo storage, but I think this pack could benefit from a designated bullet box or a quest line that puts the backpack upgrade method on the player's radar. On the topic of backpacks, you can only carry 1 in this pack, at least that's how it's intended to be played, which is a fair limitation I 100% agree with. It makes you actually consider what you're picking up instead of just looting everything, and forces you to explore other mobile storage methods aside from just spamming backpacks. I'm sure something interesting could be pulled off with create machinery, but I found something that should be patched in the next update relating to backpacks and crates. This doesn't work for every crate variant, but yeah. Regarding bugs, since this pack is unfinished, this isn't something I hold against it as much, but I literally went into creative mode to get rid of some of the items in the hotel that didn't have a tool assigned. I didn't want to sit there for a full 30 seconds destroying a wire trash bin because a mod dev didn't assign it a tool correctly, and I hope that this is something that's fixed, though I understand this is a mod issue and not a mod pack issue. I also think the temperature system is a little bit buggy, but it definitely works better than the one RLCraft has, so I'm not complaining. The last bit of critique I have for the pack revolves around some things regarding MSMP players. My friend Rivaled brought up the Create jetpack and the Elytra from Immersive Engineering, citing them as feeling overpowered and needing changes for the balance of the pack. I personally didn't interact with those things, but it would be worth it for the devs to look into them. I also think that this pack could benefit from maybe a more complex plane mod, although I'm not sure if one exists on 1.18.2. I also think that the plane speed versus the car speed is kind of funny, because cars, if you get the right ones, they're faster than the planes. And like the only thing that planes have over cars is that you can kind of take them anywhere, but the cars still have that advantage too because of the underground train tunnels that go pretty much all over the map. I think some changes could be done there. Another player, Nick, brought up some concerns with golden apples. Since they are the only thing that can cure infection, they are incredibly difficult to craft, but they are very easy to loot for, which is a bit strange. Personally, I think this is again to incentivize scavenging over complete automation, but also to avoid early game players getting completely screwed over by infection. I want to add on a little disclaimer. This next section is just short suggestions. These are just ideas that may not even be possible, and you should take them with a grain of salt, as these are just my thoughts as someone that really loves the pack. Also, don't go throwing them in the pack's Discord, as I'm sure the devs already hear enough ideas that are dismissed with good reason. I think it could be interesting to explore the infection mechanic further and make infection take longer to set in, allowing it to be spread to other players at certain stages and things like that. It could also be worth it to tweak the likelihood of getting infected and make it more likely as the difficulty scales or as the player crosses certain progression thresholds, so again we avoid new players getting destroyed by it. Nick also expressed wanting food to maybe be more scarce, which got me thinking, what if this pack had food spoilage, thus encouraging players to get into agriculture and settle down with a base and be more incentivized to set up proper defenses? This one I know damn well may not be possible because of how much lag it could cause, and then how would you even deal with that with looter? either, but the idea could be interesting since food is often one of the first and biggest struggles we think of when we think of the apocalypse. My friend Elite Meats, who you all may know as one of the devs behind Rebirth of the Night, wanted me to add thoughts on the final dimension. He thinks that in keeping with the theme of the flesh leaking out into the lab, it could be really cool if the dimension was coated in the stuff, needing to be cut away with an axe or sword to reach the excess amount of ores underneath. I think it's a really interesting idea. I think it could brush with being a little too close to the nether if done incorrectly, but I do think it's something interesting. I know a lot of what I've been saying seems rather negative, and you may be thinking, Cosmo, your title calls this pack a flawed masterpiece. You say it's your favorite mod pack, but you're focusing so much on the flaws. And you're kind of right. I love this pack dearly. It suits my playstyle perfectly, and it is the most fun I've had in quite a long time with packs I've slotted for reviews. Scratching the Burgeria pack, that one was goated. Plus, I've gotten so involved in this community over the last year that now some of my best friends are MODPACK developers, which means I see the back end of development for packs like Compression, Rebirth of the Night, and Better Minecraft even. Trust me when I say this pack is so much fun for loot goblins and people who enjoy apocalypse style packs. It's unfinished in some areas and very polished in others, and it shows, but it's so worth it. Big props to the dev team, as I'm sure so much work has gone into this, and I cannot wait for 6.0 to release. That being said, I think it's worth giving a shot, and if you don't like it, that's okay. Thank you for watching. YouTube thinks you'll like this video, so maybe check it out. Thanks, bye!
Cosmo, I'm tired of fucking hearing you complain, so here you go.
What are you whatting about? What?
The fact that you just randomly picked up.
What? What, Raggy? What's wrong?